The hyperspace tunnel opened, and this black thing came crawling out from between the stars. We thought it was a ghost ship, until it opened fire. The Eclipse Star Dreadnought, otherwise known as the Eclipse Super Star Destroyer, was Palpatine's ultimate flagship. Whilst other inferior Super Star Destroyers like the Executor was useful in Palpatine's control over the galaxy, the Eclipse Super Star Destroyer went beyond that, a new generation of capital ship, and was primarily used by Palpatine for complete domination of any opposing faction. It acted as a mobile superweapon, something the Death Star could simply not do. The vessel boasted a smaller version of the axial super laser. Whilst not as powerful as the Death Stars, it could wipe out a continent with ease. It was imbued with the dark side of the Force, and was said wherever Palpatine's flagship went, so did the feeling of despair and hopelessness. The Eclipse Star Dreadnought came in at 17,500 meters and supported a minimum crew of 88,500 people. The armament of the ship varies from source to source. According to Wikipedia, it comes with an axial super laser, 550 heavy laser cannons, 500 turbo lasers, 75 ion cannons, 100 tractor beam projectors, and 10 gravity well projectors. These stats are tweaked and reformatted for gameplay in Thrawn's Revenge, where the stats come in at 99,825 hull, 72,000 shields, 1 axial super laser, 50 heavy dual turbo lasers, 8 medium ion cannons, and 55 heavy laser cannons, truly boasting a planet's worth of weaponry. In terms of gameplay for the Eclipse Super Star Destroyer, we'll be comparing the ship across different mods for the game Star Wars Empire at War. These mods range from Thrawn's Revenge, Remake, and Yodin mod. For Thrawn's Revenge, the Eclipse Super Star Destroyer is one of the strongest capital ships you can build for the Empire faction. The ship has some of the highest base damage and can destroy most capital ships and cripple most super capital ships with its axial super laser. The damage on its axial super laser has been reduced in the game. The laser can't take out bigger super capital ships like the Mediator or the Blue Diver from the New Republic faction, and it takes roughly 3 to 4 super lasers to take out the Viscount Super Star Defender. Despite the reduction in power on the super laser, it's made up for it with the laser being able to fire at any direction. The ship in-game does not have to face the enemy directly, and there is 0 chance the laser can miss. The super laser requires 210 seconds of recharge before it is able to utilize it again. The ship is likely due a redesign and reconfiguration of its base stats. When this will happen in Thrawn's Revenge, the answer is unknown. Its hull and shields are some of the best stats in the game, just short of the Viscount's hull and shield stats. With almost 100,000 in hull and over 70,000 in shields, the Eclipse can be a bullet sponge and soak up most of the damage in the front line. Not to mention, its interdictor gravity well projectors prevents enemies from escaping battle, which is especially vital when you're trying to chase down a fleet that is trying to avoid fights at all cost. The weaknesses to the Eclipse Super Star Destroyer is that it takes up a lot of population cap, a feature in Empire at War that limits how big your fleet can be at one time. Since the Eclipse is one of the biggest Super Star Destroyers you can deploy in the game, it takes up so much population cap that it doesn't leave too much space for other ships like Star Destroyers, fighters, and other carriers. This requires players to use a bit of ingenuity in developing their fleets and can start bearing a lot of weaknesses when you're going against a higher population of smaller ships, which then draws us to our next weakness for the Eclipse, is that it is weak against fleets with multiple smaller ships. The super laser can only target one thing at a time every 210 seconds, meaning that the smaller ships can target multiple hard points of the Eclipse at one time. And with Thrawn's Revenge, much like Yodin Mod and Remake, you can only keep your distance from the enemy for so long before they catch up with you. And with the Eclipse being a very slow ship, you can't try to navigate away from them. So for some players, they might want to go with a smaller Interdictor Star Destroyer and then pick out a few medium-sized capital ships. In Yodin Mod 2021, the Eclipse Super Star Destroyer is a little bit weaker in terms of power and defenses compared to Thrawn's Revenge. With the ability to use bombers and concussion missiles to bypass shields completely, it bears its weaknesses with large numbers of smaller ships much more frequently. Enemy players and AI can build specifically to counter the ship that makes it a lot less viable and a lot more risky to use in game. And despite Yodin Mod allowing shield regeneration to happen a lot quicker, these features fall on deaf ears when bombers have too much power against super capital ships. Whilst Yodin Mod doesn't specifically give out the stats of the Eclipse Super Star Destroyer, it's very clear its shield capacity and hull is much weaker than it's seen in Thrawn's Revenge. Not to mention the Axial Super Laser is a lot weaker in this mod because it has to eat through the shields first before getting to the hull. And by the time the Axial Super Laser is ready to go again, the shields on the enemy ship have already regenerated, making the Eclipse Super Star Destroyer in fact quite weak in this mod. In Empire at War Remake, the scaling of stats are a little bit different, as shield points come in at 100,000 and hull points come in at 250,000. However, every other ship in Remake has a higher stat level compared to Thrawn's Revenge, meaning they both scale differently. The Eclipse stats in Remake pretty much boil down to the same values in Thrawn's Revenge. The only main difference is that the Eclipse cannot retreat in battle. The Eclipse's Axial Super Laser behaves pretty much the same way it does in Thrawn's Revenge. It has a very similar recharge time, but takes a bit more time in preparing the beam before firing. With rough estimations, the Axial Super Laser deals about 100,000 flat damage, requiring about 3 of the Super Lasers to take out the Viscount in one hit, resulting in the Super Laser in Remake being a little bit weaker than in Thrawn's Revenge. Much like Yodin Mod, Empire at War Remake also allows bombers and concussion missiles to bypass shields, meaning that the Eclipse is only really good against other massive super capital ships. In scenarios like that, it's quite rare and it's really not a viable ship to be using until very, very late in the game. Not to mention, shield regeneration in Remake is not as fast as it is seen in Yodin Mod and perhaps Thrawn's Revenge, meaning that the weaknesses to the Eclipse Super Star Destroyer is even more so in this mod compared to others. It does make up for the fact that the Super Laser does a lot more damage compared to Yodin Mod, but a little bit less than seen in Thrawn's Revenge, with the conclusion being that the Eclipse Super Star Destroyer is extremely powerful and one of the strongest ships you can use in Thrawn's Revenge compared to the other 2 mods we've displayed today. But the aggressive scale of power for the Eclipse Super Star Destroyer didn't end there. A sister ship under the name of the EcksToo was developed roughly around the same time as the first one, with the ship being commissioned roughly around 0 ABY and then entering into action between 4 to 6 ABY. The EcksToo looks almost identical to its older sister. The Emperor's final flagship did have a few tweaks, however. The reconfiguration of engines plus 2 extra ones compared to the Eclipse 1, and a tower at the nose of the Eclipse 2 supporting the axial laser. One of the biggest weaknesses with the Eclipse 1 was its ability to fire its super laser. The speed, acceleration and rotation of the ship's movements was ultimately the flagship's major drawbacks. The extensively redesigned engines plus additional thrusters allowed the ship to position itself more quickly to fire its main source of power. Ultimately, this ship was built to be impossible to take down in ship-to-ship combat, as the Eclipse 2 benefited from more research and development time, no interruption to its development time above the planet of Biss, and was able to modify and accustom itself after witnessing the drawbacks of the first Eclipse. But this is where we conclude on the monster that is the Eclipse-class Dreadnought, one of, if not the strongest capital ship that Emperor Palpatine had commissioned, and perhaps one ship that nobody ever wishes to go against, that being the Eclipse Super Star Destroyer.